now Carol Maddox will introduce our speaker.
Okay, thank you, Patty. Well, I have to say that in the years I've worked in nonprofits and in advocacy, my path has crossed with Jack's several times, and I tell you, I'm always thrilled and happy every time it does. So I'm very, very glad that Jack is able to speak to us today. I was very excited to find out when he was heading up the North Fulton Improvement Network, and which, because I have found that when Jack heads up something, things happen. So Jack Murphy has more than 20 years of working for and with Fortune 500 companies in operations, human resources, training, and quality areas. Jack was a senior adjunct professor for quality and operations management at Keller Graduate School for 14 years. Currently, he works in the investor relations group of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Jack chairs the North Fulton Improvement Network, a 5-year-old organization of nonprofit, faith, business, and community leaders working to build broad public awareness of the challenges faced by financially vulnerable people in our area. He has served on both the national and Georgia boards of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, is responsible for diversity, advocacy, and systemic change. Jack currently is National St. Vincent de Paul Chair of Systemic Change and Advocacy and is president of the St. Thomas Aquinas Conference. Jack received a BA in psychology from Belmont Abbey College and a master's in education from UNC Greensboro. Jack and his wife, Nancy, a retired elementary school principal, have 2 grown daughters and 2 grandchildren, and they're our neighbors in Alpharetta, Georgia. Thank you. So thank you, Jack, for coming and sharing what the North Fulton Improvement Network is doing and what we can do to help.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Carol, and for reading all of it. I'm going to have to pay more attention to it next time I send that out. That's a lot of stuff. And thank you all for coming to this presentation tonight. I can tell you that I love everybody that I've known that's gone to St. David's has just been a wonderful human being, and that goes back to when we first started the Improvement Network. We had several folks from St. David's that were there. I also did a project at Mimosa Elementary behind you all, so I know you all do great work. I've got 4 kind of meaty slides today, in addition to the 612 other slides that I have. So I'll go through the 612 quickly, but I want to spend some time on the meaty ones. And fair warning, I'll introduce them much like they do on the news when they say some of this may be disturbing. If you're not into numbers and geeky stuff, then you can tune it out and we'll get back into it. There are, let's just start. I appreciate the prayer that you started with. Since I am part of a faith-based organization myself, I have to start with a little bit of reflection. So let's just take a minute to read this quote and process it. This is if you're not familiar with Dom Camara, he is a Brazilian Roman Catholic Archbishop, former, he's no longer with us. But I use this a lot in my work, either by saying it or by living it, because I'm trying to figure out the work that we do in St. Vincent de Paul, as many of you know, is one-on-one kind of home visits and visiting people that need help. We're not doing that now, we're doing it by telephone, but we help people get through the month, but it doesn't always last. And so that's what drew me to the work of the North Fulton Improvement Network. So the agenda today, we had a little bit of a reflection there, a little bit of the background. you'll find that I try as much as I can to stick with facts. And then we'll talk about some current events and how you can help. There are 4 things I'd like you to just burn into your mind, if you would. I shouldn't say burn into your mind. We were talking about excommunication before you got out on the call, so shouldn't say burn into your mind. But there's much more need in North Fulton than people are aware. We purposefully don't use the term poverty because people think of poverty as them someplace else. And so we've used the term financial vulnerability. The second thing is there's as many as our estimation before the pandemic was 60,000 households in North Fulton that might have difficulty coming up with a $400 car repair or medical bill sometime during the year. And the third one is, doesn't seem like it's related to poverty or need, but a significant contributor to congestion in North Fulton County is caused by people not being able to live close to where they work. And then the fourth thing is childcare. Affordable quality childcare is sort of the underneath the water part of the iceberg in need. And so we'll talk more about that. And right on cue, I want you to know I installed Westminster chimes just because I knew this was an Anglican audience. In 2013, a group of us got together. These are some of the not-for-profits, the nonprofits in North Fulton. There's a good list of them. This probably isn't everyone, but we got together at the request of actually the Johns Creek Police Department, because where I live and perhaps where you live, you'll see somebody pushing a shopping cart up and down the road. And the police had tried to deal with him and they couldn't, because he chooses to be there. At least he chooses to resist their assistance. And so they asked the nonprofits to get together and say, what can we do about this? And probably other people that are in the situation. And so what we did, we put together a task force, and these were some of the original members of the task force. You'll probably see names there that you recognize. I will pleased to say that Frida Hardage of Northside and Ken Davis still are in touch with what we're doing, but this was quite some time ago that we put this work together. And what we realized was that there was a need for, at least if not shelter, then let's figure out what churches in North Fulton offer warming centers for and cooling centers for when the heat is or coolness is extreme. So we inventoried those. We did come up with a plan for homeless assessment center. There is no real shelter in North Fulton that will take a family. There's people that will take sectors. But we got a lot of resistance on that first effort to put together a homeless assessment center. And so we decided that maybe we needed to study the problem more, and why were people resistant to admitting that there was homelessness in North Fulton. So the next thing we started to look at was how can we get people to work? How can we get more people to be able to get to work? So we did a study using technology. Those of you who are into GIS mapping, you'll recognize this. This at the time in 2016 were the clients of North Fulton Community Charities and where they were located. And we overlaid on that the map of MARTA. And this is not meant for you to see. I mean, the slides will be available. Please don't strain your eyes too much. The point will be made in a minute, but we actually, through the help of Frida Hardage, who was also the chair of the MARTA board then, we added this little sliver of bus line. It was an area that was underserved, and using these facts and a bunch of other information, we were able to get a bus line, which didn't seem like it was much. If you can see here are are folks that helped add Route 142. And then this is the bus driver from the first day we rode with the bus to sort of celebrate. The only people that are still in their positions are me and Tanya Morris at Senior Services. The others have retired or moved on. But you can see behind us, the bus is empty. And that was a little bit demoralizing until we made a stop and this woman got on and we were just so pleased. We descended on her as if we were, she was holding a press conference because we wanted to ask her everything about why she was riding the bus and did it help and all those kinds of things. Her name is Chandra. Chandra started every day in Stone Mountain. She would take a bus to the Indian Creek station and then take a train to Peachtree, to Little Five Points, change to the north-south route. Then she would take this bus from Mansell over to take the bus would stop there before this route was added. And she would walk to her job that was about 3 miles from 400. Because she had worked there when she lived in Roswell. She was a hostess at a Mexican restaurant. She lived there with a roommate, but then the roommate kicked her out, but she liked the job so much. She commuted 2.5 hours one way every day, a total of 5 hours. And that smile on her face was there the whole route. And when we asked, well, you know, when you used to have to walk, were you still smiling? She said, you know, it's just the price of having a job I like. And it was amazing to me that she would travel so far for a job that she could easily replicate in terms of tasks in Stone Mountain. But because of the people that she knew, because of the people that she liked there, and because of the work, she took that bus route. So we were very happy, and we're so happy that the bus line has continued. But that success dealing with data got us into a little more detail, and we started to look at some available facts and data about what is happening in North Fulton. This, of course, is all of Atlanta. And so the data that this slide is based on was from 2016, and you'll see that the problem is on its face that rents were rising faster than income. There is a ton of data that's between here, though. It's not just simply let's get more affordable housing. And that's really what we're trying to do in our work. But what we were looking for is how can we get it to North Fulton? How can we get more indicators of North Fulton so that the people that would dismiss Atlanta and South Fulton from these numbers could get a better understanding of what's going on in North Fulton. So one of the indicators we looked at was free and reduced meals in North Fulton schools. And if you look from 2000 to 2001, there was a huge spike in the number of people in North Fulton schools receiving free and reduced lunch. That is not a small thing to notice. That's a pretty big deal. And so that was really some of the stuff where we started with. Then we got really geeky. This is one of those 4 slides I warned you about. So turn away if you're adverse to numbers. I won't look. What we did in order to get to the root of North Fulton problems, we looked at census tracts. Census tracts are subsets of zip codes. And census tracts are much more closely aligned with neighborhoods, although they really don't have any neighborhood boundaries. They are just that. They're part of the census, the United States government's census that they take every 10 years, but they also do something every year that's an estimate down to a census tract level of lots of different points of data. The data that we are going to look at tonight is from before the pandemic. we, like everyone else, got hit with the pandemic, and our ability to stretch ourselves as nonprofits was tested because of all of the demand that was coming in. So this is prior to the pandemic. I don't want to speak for the census numbers that just came out, but I can't imagine they've gotten that much better. But what you'll see out of the 59 neighborhoods or census tracts we looked at, 44 of them saw increases in poverty in North Fulton. For North Fulton, we say that's anything outside of 285, really. But some of the gains were very slight. But you'll see the darker the color, the greater the increase. And some of these are in the 30% increase in poverty. And so we knew then that there's a problem that's underrepresented. If again, poverty is an indicator of a subset of people in need. And so that's really what started us off. Now, this is a slide that is somewhat easy to understand because it comes from MIT. Now, I've never said that before in my life, that I've understood anything that MIT did, but MIT has a living wage calculator for every county in the United States. And they say how much in a county it costs to live in that county. And it's very, as you would expect from MIT, it's very detailed. In MIT says that it's almost $65,000 in 2018 for a family of 4 to live in Fulton County. But what does that look like in North Fulton? Well, our estimate is that it's anywhere from $80,000 to $90,000. And that's largely because of the price of housing and childcare. This is a little more proof of that. This is, again, a geeky slide, but median income, those of you who are math challenged, you know it's a midpoint for salaries, or in this case, income, household income. In North Fulton zip codes, when we broke it down, it is $96,000, almost $97,000 is the median income. Now, why does that matter? Well, a lot of federal programs like Section 8 housing or low-income housing are based on median income, the prevailing wage in a particular area. If you look at all of Atlanta and Sandy Springs, you can see there's a pretty big difference, and certainly a big difference between all of the United States. Why do we go into this level of detail? Well, there are a ton of ideas on how to fix need and poverty. We want to make sure we are making recommendations to fix the right ones. So we want to have as many facts as we can that are broken down by North Fulton. One of the things that we realized when we saw $96,000 median income was that it was leaving out what Georgia Tech calls essential economy workers. Now, hopefully that just got all the Georgia Tech people back engaged. There you go. Way to go, attendance taker. And I think that's my only other college reference, so I won't talk about last night's football game. Essential economy workers are those folks that we need. We can't offshore it. We can't outsource it. We have to have people that work in hospitality and restaurants and help make the beds at assisted living and are paving the roads. Those folks at $96,000 at median income can easily be priced out of the market. And that's one of the things we are studying is how do we keep those folks living closer to where they work? Certainly when we talk to people in Roswell, the Roswell Inc. and folks like that, they have a lot of feedback on what we can do about keeping them with employees, keeping their employees employed. This is another one of those dense slides. I test marketed this with my co-parent, and her response was, they're never going to get this. This is just too geeky. But it is something that you can study. It won't be on the final tonight, but I will send a test to you later on. The place to focus on here is poverty level. This is the 2018 poverty level for a family of four. It's $25,000. And as we said, there are lots of people, we say $60,000 that are earning less than 75. That includes all these essential workers. $51,900 is a pretty decent income, but it's difficult to live on that salary in North Fulton County. Teachers, police, senior services, construction worker, all these folks are considered financially vulnerable. That it's not meant to disparage the trade. If you have a second income in the family, it's probably a lot easier. And then there's other things that we'll talk about that might make it easier, that not just salary dependent. But when we want to talk about how can people live closer to their jobs, which is something that's on our list of things to do, this is something that we want to take into consideration. So we made a presentation a year ago, last November, to a group of, it was actually 200 plus leaders at Mount Pisgah. And this is some of the group that was there that day. There may be some folks that are on this call that were there. We had 4 speakers. We had Frank Fernandez, who's now head of the Community Foundation, Egbert Perry, who is a developer, Dr. Donna Beagle is a national poverty expert. Those were our panelists, and it was facilitated by Laurie Geary, former local television anchor. And as I said, we had more than 200 people there that spent half a day with us learning about some of the challenges that we were facing, that people in North Fulton are facing. And this is what we ended up coming out with. As I said, 60,000 families that are probably one large bill away from trouble. The average housing at the time was $1,485. That is something that creates something called house burden. Child well-being is something that people can really latch on to. That comes from United Way. We don't have enough quality child care in North Fulton slots. We'll talk about that in a minute. Only 7% of the people in the 5 North Fulton cities that we looked at actually live in the city where they work. That's a really low number. And the next time you're caught in traffic, think about that. I showed a slide earlier, or I'll show a slide in a minute, that said we're actually looking at 6 North Fulton cities. Mountain Park only has 6 jobs in it. So that's still a city that we care about, but that's a lot of retired people. So let me stop there and see if the question taker has any questions that they'd like me to address.
I do. There's one question, Jack, and it speaks to the question of whether there is a different or a better criterion for determining assisted housing or housing subsidies from state or federal. Is there some other criterion that's perhaps more effective?
That is it's an excellent question, and it is a master's level kind of course that people are experimenting with. There is an idea that I love that, well, first of all, I shouldn't say our bias, my bias, and you can imagine because of where I work at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, I see an awful lot of companies. I can tell you, when I was in college, I was pretty much bought into the fact that it was business that was the problem. And maybe it was then. I can tell you now that there are far more businesses that are interested in actually solving problems more so than just making contributions. They really want to roll up their sleeves and solve problems. Not everyone, but there's a good number of them. And I think that has become even more visible after the racial unrest and catastrophes that happened this year, when we see businesses actually um, actually helping to solve some of these challenges. So to answer the question, I don't think, I have not seen any evidence that says that there are public answers to public housing that can keep up with demand. Um, I grew up in North Carolina, and my father was in the textile business. And in one of his customers was Cannon Mills in Kannapolis, North Carolina. There, the founder of Cannon Mills, Charlie Cannon, after World War I, was trying to get people to move to this little podunk town so that he could find workers. He built houses for them. He built schools for them. He built what he needed to get the workers that he needed. Henry Ford is famous for offering a decent wage to his workers, not because he was socially conscious, but because he wanted somebody to be able to buy his cars. We see Amazon now paying for giving grants to cities for housing. Walmart was a big supporter of the Affordable Care Act, not necessarily because they were altruistic, but because they weren't paying their employees enough to get health care. There are ways that we can find mutual ground on some of these difficult challenges. And that is a bias that I am entering this with. Yes, we want public solutions because you can't fix some of these problems with just private charities or nonprofits. You can't have enough food pantries in each one of our churches to feed the need that food stamps does. There's just no way. I'm not saying, so I'm in favor of public assistance. But when it comes to housing, it seems like that gets tied up in so much red tape that it is very, very difficult. St. Vincent de Paul across the United States has an amazing amount of housing that we get paid for through HUD. And the people that are doing it, they have to have full-time jobs to keep up with the paperwork. That said, the coolest solution I've heard of in the last couple of years came from the former Roswell housing director. He came and spoke to one of our task force meetings years ago and said that he had seen in England a approach that took church parking lots and built housing over the parking lots. Because in North Fulton, like in most cities around the United States, the cost of land is what really drives up the price of housing. If you can take the cost of land out of the equation, housing can be fairly affordable. And so I'm just intrigued by this. Apparently he shopped it to a couple of places in Roswell, and it didn't work very well. They got a lot of resistance, and I guess there was some city, I don't know all the details, but my church is way out on Rucker Road, and we have tons of land. The disadvantage is we don't have, we're not on a bus line, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't be if it didn't drive up demand. So that's a kind of a long answer to, yes, we should have different ways of counting it. We should find different ways of having more Section 8 vouchers. But we also have to realize that our social mission doesn't preclude us from doing things outside of the box. And if anybody's going to be innovative, it's going to be, in my view, faith-based organizations. So do you think that answered the question?
Yes, I think comprehensively it has. Bob, you have a follow-up or a comment there? Bob Coleman?
No, that I just felt like any model that's based on average income of an area just allows for too many people to fall through the cracks.
Yes.
And so I think the answer works, and I think there have got to be other models. Vanita and I a few years ago were at MoMA, where they had a contest that architects put together how to plan cities and how to do it in a better fashion, taking into account, I think, 8 different things, and one of them was affordable housing. And so it seems to me that that kind of thing is only a beginning point. But it seems to me there has to be a better model. We've
Yes.
got people with big brains. They should be able to figure this out.
Yes.
And it can't just be on one criteria.
You're exactly right, Bob. And actually, we are part of our charge, our new charge as the North Fulton Improvement Network is to find more of those innovative solutions and bring spotlights to them. You'll see that we changed our name from the North Fulton Poverty Task Force to the North Fulton Improvement Network. I like to call it the network, but some of you may be familiar with the Catholic organization that is also called Network. So I have to be careful that I don't step on the toes of some nuns that I'm friends with. But we are looking at 5 different areas of focus: workforce housing, income, transportation, child well-being, food insecurity. We are trying to look at these as discreetly as we can, knowing that they are all interconnected. When I showed that graph earlier of the rents rising faster than income, these are all at play. That's the gap between those two. Each one of these plays a role down to the individual family level. So our vision is a community where all individuals, including the financially vulnerable, can thrive. And our mission is to build broad public awareness to the challenges. So we are not in direct service. We are not doing job fairs or the kinds of things that the nonprofits are already doing. And most importantly, we are not trying to do fundraising for nonprofits. We are trying to get all sectors of the community to sit at the table and, as Bob just said, use their big brains and perhaps big money and mutual self-interest in solving some of these challenges. At the end of the day, I've been in St. Vincent de Paul for about 14 years. The organization has been around for 107. We just had our 175th anniversary. And there are a number of charities all around the nation that have been in business for a long, long time. There's still 40-some million people in poverty. Obviously, this can't be solved by faith groups or nonprofits alone. We've got to get more people at the table, and again, for their mutual self-interest. So this is a little bit about what we do. We are a data generator think tank. I told you a lot of these things already. We're looking for best practices. We do need a strong board. We want to collaborate with more universities. And we've been advised not to become our own nonprofit. There's too much administrative work. We are all volunteers. None of us are paid to do what we do. So we do it just for kicks. This is how we're defining success in our first year. I put that up there at my own peril because the right-hand arrow at the bottom is getting dangerously close. COVID really did take a lot of the wind out of our sails, largely because most of the members still are nonprofits, and they were just sucked into the workflow that was so great. This is the next challenge that I'm really kind of working with. We call it influencers. It might be best cause a business advisory panel. We need more businesses to help us with these challenges. So let's get into some of the things that we've done so far. We have had 3 public-facing events so far. We call them fireside chats. The first one was on October 28th on workforce. This is a little bit of a dense slide, but for those of you that this isn't an official warning because they get worse. But what you'll see is before the pandemic, the hourly jobs, this is the jobs that require, these lower wage jobs are defined as they don't require a college degree and they pay less than the US median wage. Now, this information comes from the Federal Reserve. So if it's too geeky, blame them. They're the ones that also send all the money into the economy. So they have a tendency to be geeky. But there's stuff that they are doing that is just incredible to me. And one of the things they're doing is tracking some of the workforce issues that we're concerned with. So we're going to be calling on them. This actually was part of the presentation from the member of the Federal Reserve that gave our first fireside chat. This next one is really geeky. For those of you who are wondering, why is it that it's so difficult for a single mother with kids to get out of need, get out of poverty, to get on stable footing? This is one of the major culprits. It's referred to as the benefits cliff, and it does get very, very dense. And the next slide may send you, we may have people dropping off the call after the next slide. But basically, you'll see these little plateaus here, these little dips. As a person's salary goes up, their net resources goes down. So net resources defined as the money they're earning, plus the benefits they're receiving, minus the taxes they have to pay, and their expenses. Expenses going back to that MIT calculator, that it's sort of a standard across the board thing. So in this case, this person is working their way up, and all of a sudden their benefits decline and their earning income declines. Now, what you'll see on the next slide, I guess I'm scaring you. What you'll see on the next slide is frequently these are things like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credits that don't come into play until the end of the year. So this mother may not even realize, why is it that I can't stretch my money any further? I'm making more money than I was last month. What's going on here? Well, what's going on is this little color block thing is taking away benefits faster than she's earning money. And that's the challenge. It's difficult to really understand. These are all of the programs that are available, the major programs that are available to a family. And this little block here is when you move your cursor over, you'll see in the bottom of the slide before this is the link to this page. So this is an interactive slide if you go on the Federal Reserve's website. And if you have been there before, congratulations, I want to meet you. This is where my cursor was here. So when somebody earns $70,000 or $68,000, they no longer get adult Medicaid. They no longer get TANF, $0. They no longer get SNAP or food stamps. These benefits have all run out. And so if you look back at this slide, it takes a long time in earning power for this mother to get to $70,000 in real income when it's really only about $23,000. And I can tell you in the work that I do with St. Vincent de Paul, I hear constantly, I can't understand why I can't get out of debt. This is one of the major reasons. It's the benefits cliff. Our second workforce, our chat was on workforce mobility. This is the last, I think this is the last dense slide I have. And let me just focus on one box here. Let's look at Sandy Springs. The number in the middle is the amount of jobs there are in Sandy Springs. 8,000 are the number of people that live and work in Sandy Springs. 8,000 people live and work in Sandy Springs. This is from 2018 census number. 120,000 people come into Sandy Springs every day to work. 39,000, 38, almost 40,000 leave. Now, the consultant that I used this afternoon, my wife, said, you know, is that saying that the arrows, that these people go to Johns Creek? No, these are just people that come into the city and people that go out of the city. When we talk about congestion, we're talking about these people and these people. Ideally, not everybody is qualified for the jobs that in the cities where they live, but we need to think about, this is perhaps one of the most revealing slides that we have, even though it's difficult to understand and a little fuzzy on your screen. There are lots of jobs that need to be filled in the cities where we live. And we need to find ways that Certainly when it comes to computer programming or something, we may not find somebody. But when it comes to some of the low skilled jobs that people are driving in for, where, what can we do to help people live closer to their jobs? The third fireside chat was on childcare. This is the one that gets the oohs and the ahs because everybody wants to help with childcare. The thing that I've become most interested in over the last couple of years is early brain development. You've heard terms like language nutrition. We had Stephanie Blank, who helped found the organization on early childhood education, and she used this example of what happens when a child is read to in the early years before they get to school, and what happens when they aren't read to. This looks theoretical until you actually look at a brain scan. This is the brain scan of a 3-year-old child that came from an underdeveloped family or a family of poverty. This is the brain of a child that came from a family of means. That doesn't mean that every child in poverty has a small brain. That's not it at all. But when we talk about childcare, when we talk about quality childcare, are we actually putting our resources where they need to be? When I say it's sort of the under the sea part of the iceberg, because, and I actually had a CEO when this was presented at the chamber, at the Atlanta Chamber, a CEO said, well, yeah, I can understand what this does for the economy in 18 years, that this child's brain will be more developed. And so when they're ready for the workforce, what does this get me now though? Well, the obvious answer, if we were doing that all of you have come to, is it puts people in the workforce right away. If we can get better childcare for people to free them up to go to work, I mean, how many people do we know because of COVID have left jobs because they have to stay home and take care of their kids? I've lost 2 colleagues at my work who just said, look, I love my job, but I love my kids more, and that's where my responsibility is. So there's a double payback to quality childhood education, and we have to work on that. Our next fireside chat is next week. It's on housing, and we have 3 outstanding speakers. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Joe Clifford. He used to be in Roswell. The director of Lawrenceville Housing. Actually, Bob, I hope you're able to join this next week because she has some very creative ways that she is solving public housing. And then James Alexander is the president of Mercy Housing. This is the event to register for the event, or the Eventbrite to register. All are welcome. There is no charge. But I want to just give you this slide just because it's a housing related slide. It's probably pretty easy. This isn't as dense as some of the others. The blue line is 2019 eviction filings. You can see that they're higher than they were this year because of the moratorium. Actually here, the courts were closed, so there were no evictions. As the court started to open, there was still a muted eviction response because of the CDC moratorium. But you can see there were still evictions because not everyone was eligible for the moratorium. I am gearing up for the February evictions to be far higher than this. If the moratorium isn't solved, I think we're going to have real trouble. And to be balanced, we already have real trouble on the parts of landlords. I don't think, not every landlord is a vicious landlord. There are lots of landlords that have really tried to work with their folks, but they're laying off employees. I went in to pay a bill at an apartment complex last week, and the woman said, the manager said, "Do you help with mortgages?" Because I'm in trouble on my mortgage because my hours have been cut. And of course we do. So I think this is going to be a big crisis could be a big crisis in February. This is really hard on the eyes. So please don't spend too much time looking at it because I've excerpted 2 pieces of it after all that bad news about the evictions, I wanted to show you a survey that Alpharetta did a couple of months ago, 718 responses, certainly not total population, but there's two numbers we're going to look at. Some of them came, one of them came from here and one of them came from here. And that is, of the 5% of the people that, or the people that don't live in Alpharetta, why didn't you move to Alpharetta? 61% the housing said the housing is too expensive. Politicians listen to that. They care about that. The one that I just got gleeful about was, what kind of housing do we need more of in Alpharetta? 37% said single family, not to be, not unexpected. 36% said workforce housing was needed in Alpharetta. And they defined it in the survey so people knew what they were getting themselves into. Rent of $1,350 a month or a home of $310,000. When we talk to politicians about affordable housing, about workforce housing, the first thing out of their mouth is nobody wants it. Well, this gave me courage. This should give us all a little bit of a boost in terms of advocacy. There are people that want this in our community, and we have to speak up. So that is how you can help. How you can help, please pray for our work. You can sign up on our website. You can attend next week's fireside chat. I didn't talk much about community dinners. We are hosting community dinners, and I'd love to have you join those. Those are small dinners where you talk about these issues from a facilitated menu, much like you're going to do in the small groups, and then talk with your city council representative. Make your views known. Advocacy is important.
Jack?
Yeah.
I'd like to facilitate my own question.
Yes, sir.
If you could go back to the previous slide, the housing, affordability or yes.
Oh,
The one after that.
this one-
Okay, so 4% of the responders are saying multifamily rental. They would like to see that. In other words, that's a glaring minority of desirability, if you will.
Yes.
But then 36% responded about workforce housing. Are the two mutually exclusive?
No.
Right. So one could impute that a lot of the respondents do not want to see affordable housing. I mean, if you put it, if you were to combine the two. In other words, a lot of workforce housing would, by definition of the affordability, have to be multifamily / rental. Are you with me?
I understand your question, and in my view, we're not going to get, well, I really do believe strongly in advocacy, and I do think advocacy can work. I also think, though, that our job in this work is to try to find as many allies as we can. And so what that tells me is the workforce housing that we see traditionally as multifamily is not desirable in the community. But what are the other alternatives to workforce housing design? To Bob's point, how do we get big brains thinking about how can we get workforce housing that a community would welcome rather than would resist? And I also, because I am a faithful person, I try to be a faithful person, I do have hope. And I do believe that that there are ways that that they're not mutually exclusive. I certainly understand your point, and we're just going to have to be more creative about it. And in all honesty, the closer we get to the perimeter, probably the more of this number would go up, as people are just tired of the sprawl, and there's not much land left. But excluding Roswell, of course. Um,
What is happening though is that a lot of the in-town residents are finding living in those areas to be even more expensive, restrictively so, and especially the younger ones, the millennials, and they're moving into the suburbs, therefore driving up rents. So that's another factor that's going to cause evictions to become even more of a crisis. Near
Yes, I'm
term.
very worried about. I am very worried about that. I'm very worried about about gentrification of some of the places where we have multifamily today, where we're paying a lot of giving a lot of assistance, and the incentive may be for the landlord to evict at one rent level so that they can upscale for another, and we're watching that very closely. I know my time is up. For the record, I was 45 minutes and 3 seconds when the last question was asked.
It's perfect. Perfect. Jack. Thank you. We want to continue this conversation, so we're going to invite you to a breakout room right now, and you will need to accept that invitation on your electronic device. And you'll have a facilitator in each of your small groups that has a few questions for you all to ponder and share with each other. So I'm going to go ahead and open those up, and then please stay. We'd like to invite you all back to the large group at the very end, and we'll have a closing prayer and wrap up and some more information on our next event. All right, here we go. All right. Karen, can you hear me? Pat?
I can hear you. And you've got four, is this my group? Or
No,
do you want me to
you
go to
need-
room 3?
Yes, go to room 3 if you can.